Hello and welcome to another exciting episode of Pittsburgh Sports Memories. On this episode, we will be covering rivals, and mainly from the viewpoint of Pitt fans, since I'm a Pitt fan and our my co-host Tim Hannon's a Pitt fan. So we're just gonna view it from the Pitt perspective. So sorry, all you other people that are fans of other college teams. And also, we'll be obviously focusing on the college game because I think the rivalries are much bigger in college than they probably are in the pros.
And if we have fans of, Alabama listening to this podcast, then good on you. I'm not sure what you're doing here, but we welcome you and would love to educate you about Pitt's rivals.
Yeah. Auburn's really great too. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, is that their big rivalry? But yeah, there you go.
Yeah, or Georgia.
We'll
or
get into that at
somebody.
the end of the episode. I'm probably going to get on my soapbox a little bit. So if everybody likes to hear me like go off about a topic, that'll probably be the end of the podcast. Something to look forward to there for everybody. So, even a bad season, and there's been plenty in Pitt history, can be salvaged with a big win over your rival. So, if you don't have these games, it's just kind of at the end of the season, it's just kind of like, okay, yeah, cool. We get to play like, I don't know, North Carolina or somebody dumb from the ACC. Let's play Wake Forest. Woohoo. So it really makes the games much more exciting and much more fun, especially when there's something on the line too at the end. It even adds because you always want to beat your rival or keep your rival from getting into a big game. So on that note, I have come up with a handy dandy scale here. It's going to rank our rival, the strength of the rivalry. So I went from 1 to 10, and so 1 would be no annoyance, to 10, any day that team loses is a good day. Or as I know like a lot of fans, it's like Schadenfreude, I guess is the term. Like, you enjoy the other team suffering. So when that team, so like if, the saying is my favorite team is, Pitt, and my second favorite team is whoever's playing Penn State. So there you go, something to that effect. But so number one, the not really annoying would be this is people that probably Pitt fans would know or have known in the past. Frank Beamer, he was a nice guy. He ran a decent program at Virginia Tech. I really wouldn't. Virginia Tech rivalry really isn't that heated. I don't think. I don't know. Number two is Randy Etzel. He was a small. He would like annoy us because he like beat us probably more than UConn ever should, and that was in football. So also, number three would be Khaled Al-Amin. He's the infamous scoreboard table jumper from Pitt basketball history way back when. Number four, we're starting to get into the higher annoyance here. Paul Pasqualoni. I don't know if anybody remembers him, but he always seemed to beat Pitt when he was the head coach in Syracuse football in the 90s. Hard to believe Syracuse football was actually very good in the 1990s. They were a very good program with the likes of Donovan McNabb, Marvin Harrison, and Dwight Freeney. They were a very good team. Number five is Jim Boeheim, who's just generally annoying and grumpy. Six is Jim Calhoun, who's UConn's version of Jim Boeheim, just another grumpy old man coach. Number seven, and maybe this is a little low, I don't know. He never annoyed me that much, was Joe Paterno, but he's definitely the most self-important. He thinks he's better than everybody else on this list. He probably thinks he should be rated 10. And 8 is Brian Kelly, who's just a general loudmouth and apparently has a blatant disregard for his employees' safety. So I wouldn't want to work for Brian Kelly. Number 9, coming in pretty hard, is Charlie Weiss, who I just, yeah. He definitely wrote checks his teams couldn't cash. He definitely would talk a lot of trash and couldn't back it up. And number 10 would be reserved for the likes of Rich Rodriguez and Todd Graham. And that's basically like, if you went down to Century 3 Chevrolet or, a used car place and you had one of the salesmen from that team, from that dealership coach your football team, you're going to get sold a lemon or a bill of goods, I mean, I don't know how those players in the University of Hawaii are doing, but they got Todd Graham to deal with. So at least you got like the beach and the waves and stuff. So it's not a total loss. And I don't know where Rich Rod is. I think he's offensive coordinator somewhere. And there's a top secret number 11 who we'll reveal as the list goes on, but he earns his own spot there. So starting off our list of rivals to Pitt is Duke. That would be the Duke from North Carolina. Pitt leads this in 15-9 in football. They've won 15 and actually lost 9 times to Duke, which is hard to believe. Duke, of course, leads in basketball 13-6. Some of these games will have nicknames. This one really doesn't, so I made one up. I'm just going to call it the Duke Sucks game. So there you go. I put this level of rivalry at a solid Jim Boeheim, which is 5, so halfway. But everybody just in general doesn't like Duke. Pitt beats them regularly in football. I do remember there was a game. I can't remember the year, but it was a Paul Chryst coach team, and they had Connor. So it was probably Connor's second year, I want to say. It was before Narduzzi came in. And like literally I'm bigger than the people that were going to play defensive line for Duke. So I knew James Conner had an unbelievable game. And of course, Pitt lost that game as only Pitt could. And I think that's the last time Duke's beat Pitt in football. So a big one in basketball was I think we've talked about this before, was Pitt beat Duke in Madison Square Garden on a Levance Field shot in the final seconds of overtime. And I also remember when Pitt first went to the ACC, like they were doing well. That was still when Jamie Dixon was the coach. And they like Duke, like they had beaten some like, Clemson's and maybe an NC State, like some of those other teams. And like, it was like the ACC sent Duke up to Pittsburgh to put Pitt in their place. And like I've never seen like Mike Krzyzewski that excited about like a regular season game. He was like pumping his fists and stuff when they pulled out a win in the last couple of seconds against Pitt up here. So I know Tim's a Duke fan, aren't you?
Yeah. So you said everybody hates Duke.
Well, not everyone, but most people.
Yeah, most people do, and I get it. I really do. I mean, we won't go into all the reasons, but I get it. But I was a big fan of Duke when I was a kid, and Coach Krzyzewski, and I still root for Duke basketball. Obviously not when they're playing Pitt now that they're in the same conference, but I do like Duke and Duke football. I mean, it's like almost, I don't want to say irrelevant, but it's not, when people think of that school, I mean, obviously think of basketball first and not football.
David Cutcliffe's a nice guy. I know it's just like I think it's more in basketball than football for sure. And although they did beat us, I was at that game that they beat us in football, but I don't think they've beaten Pitt since then, honestly. So
wasn't there a game? I think this was also in the Chryst era where the final was like 58-55.
I think that was with Savage and Tyler Boyd.
Okay.
Yeah, they had the score in like every play. Like Tom Savage had an unbelievable game. I think actually that's the second most or third, like because Kenny Pickett just had that game over the weekend where he threw 6 touchdowns, and I think it's him, then Savage and Marino are like all, which isn't. It's just an odd list to think of those 3 guys are all in one. Like, okay, Dan Marino and Tom Savage and Kenny Pickett. Well, I think Kenny Pickett's pretty good. I don't know, probably not as good as Dan Marino, but
that's about the only thing I remember, significantly in the Duke Pitt football rivalry. And in basketball, yeah, they've had some good wins against them because Pitt was actually a college basketball superpower there for 15 minutes or so. But obviously, Pitt's never done anything in basketball to the level of what Coach K has done at Duke.
Well, it's kind of weird. Like people like get all upset, but like I don't think Duke's been past the final, like the Sweet 16 in a while either, have they? I mean, it's been a couple years.
It's been a while, and this is, I think Coach K. I think he announced this is his last season.
His last game's going to be at the Peterson Event Center. Ironically enough, I think so. Yeah, that's so. I got maybe they're trying to schedule him a win. They figure, or well, it doesn't. What's his name? The coach of Pitt, doesn't he? He has some Duke connections, so
Right.
maybe that
He
was
played
part of
he
it
played for
too.
Coach K. So yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Back in the 90s.
And he coached there too. Yeah.
Right.
So, well, sticking with the, I guess more of a basketball than football rivalry kind of thing. UConn. In football, UConn actually leads 5 games to 4. I cannot believe we've lost 5 games to the UConn football program. In basketball, of course, UConn leads 32-28, which I'm actually surprised Pitt has it. It's that close of a series. So there is no nickname for this series. Maybe it should be the scoreboard jumpers. I don't know. Whatever. The level of rivalry right now, it's a 3 because they really don't play each other at all and won't in the near future. In its heyday, it was definitely a solid 8. We were up to Brian Kelly levels of rivalry because that was a big rivalry. Both schools were playing for Big East championships. Both were like consequential games during the regular season in basketball, where one team would be ranked number 1 and one team would be not far behind. So definitely, it's more of a recent rivalry, and it was in the Big East days in basketball. Another thing that I think that made it a rivalry was Randy Etzel, the coach of UConn. He would come into Western Pennsylvania, and he would kind of get like the kids that didn't go to Pitt, be like, "Oh, hey, come up to UConn, and you can still come, play in front of your mom every other year or something, in front of your family." So it was, and another annoying thing about UConn was like ESPN always tried to hype them in football, and they were like, they just were never anything but mediocre on a good day in football, and then absolutely worship them in basketball. But they are a good basketball program. I think that they just won a national championship a couple years ago, didn't they? Yeah. So I mean, they're definitely more of a basketball school. Some memorable moments. Khaled Al-Amin jumping on the scorer's table, and Jamel Calhoun getting mad about it. Then, of course, because the Pitt fans started throwing stuff at him, so maybe shouldn't jump on the table. Brandon Knight's heroics in the Big East championship game in Madison Square Garden. Brandon Knight was hurt and like came out of the tunnel like Willis Reed and like almost saved the day for Pitt. Another more infamous than memorable was Tyler Palko sliding in a game against UConn. This is like right before the half. And like I remember Walt Harris got really criticized for that because they just settled for a field goal. And that was probably the beginning of the end of Walt Harris's career in coaching. Another great moment that nobody probably ever remember. I remember this distinctly. Randy Etzel, he had a quarterback, and I can't remember. He was a guy from Western Pennsylvania too, and he had his quarterback who had been kind of hurt the week before. But in college, they don't have the strict reporting like they do in the NFL on injuries. So he had his guy come out in like sweatpants. I remember him standing. I distinctly remember seeing him sit there while they warmed up, and then like he went in, and that guy came out in uniform and started the game. And like I guess Randy Edsel was trying to hide that his quarterback was really ready to play. And actually after that, I don't know if it was after that week or the next year, Dave Wannstedt like must have raised holy hell about that because they the Big East went to like the NFL style of injury reporting after that. So good on Pitt still won. Like UConn really wasn't that good. Of course, another infamous moment. Kemba Walker hitting that shot over poor Gary McGee. And that was one of Pitt's last appearances in the Big East tournament. I mean, that was kind of the beginning of the end of Jamie Dixon's coaching career. So, and also Pitt basketball beating UConn when they were ranked number 1 in the polls in basketball. I think Pitt actually did that twice. And that's, to my knowledge, it's one of the few times Pitt in any sport has beaten a number 1 ranked team. I know they have never done it in football, and I'm pretty sure that's the only time they've done it in basketball. So good for Pitt. Any other fond memories of the UConn Huskies now that they're gone away to the American Conference or wherever they reside nowadays?
Yeah, it was like you said, Steve, it was a really for a short time there, it was a really intense, really, really good basketball rivalry. In football, again, like you said, it was just annoying that we seemed to always lose to them. And their football program, I mean, it went from like not even basically having a football program to having a decent one. So kudos to them. But some of the games we lost to them, I do remember Walt Harris calling that slide, having Tyler Palko slide into the line of scrimmage just to kick a field goal, which I can't remember if he even made the field goal, but I remember we lost that game, and that was super frustrating. So it was just, that's all I remember about the football rivalry, was just losing games we probably shouldn't have lost
I
on
think
a consistent basis.
I think Dan Orlovsky was the quarterback of that team, and they had its running
Hmm.
back Cornell Brockington. I remember. I don't know why I remember that, but yeah, it was. Ugh, ugh. In football, it was definitely an ugh.
It was.
But at least in basketball, like it was annoying. Like it was like, but they're a good team in basketball. Like football was like they're not really much of any. They're just kind of there. It's like okay, and like you said, I think before that they're a FCS school, so.
Right.
Yeah, so yeah, they really took a step up. Randy Etzel was back just this year, and then he quit after 2 games because they're so bad. So good for Randy Etzel, I guess. Enjoy your retirement. Moving on to more of a traditional rival here with the good old Pitt Panthers. That would be the Syracuse Orange. The Syracuse has decided to change their mascot to a non-gender specific orange. I'm not sure if that's an actual orange or just the color orange. So it's orange. Uh, Pitt somehow miraculously leads the all-time series in football, 41-31-3, 3 ties because they've been playing. I forget how long they've been playing. I didn't write that down, but it's been forever. It's been since like probably the early 1900s. Syracuse, of course, leads in basketball, 64-42. This is definitely a solid 7, Joe Paterno on the line. No, there's no nickname to this game. So crush the orange. I don't know. Sure, why not? Just more annoying than anything because it always seems like the ball bounces Syracuse way. Like I said, like I remember that game at Pitt Stadium where Pitt literally blocked a field goal attempt by Syracuse, and then the quarterback just like picks it up and runs around like he was also the holder and just like throws a touchdown. It's like, oh, look at this. Look, the ball's laying here. Oh, let me just run around for 5 minutes. Oh, look, there's a touchdown. Yay. And we planned it like that. It was just horrible. Like I said, Syracuse had a great football program. I mean, even in the 90s, Donovan McNabb and Marvin Harrison were really good. And historically, Ernie Davis and Jim Brown. Jim Brown was amazing in college. And Ernie Davis won the Heisman. Yes, he won the Heisman at Syracuse before his tragic death from leukemia. He actually died from leukemia. That darn stupid dome. I know Tim loves the dome, so yeah. One day we'll have to take a road trip up and see a game in the dome, huh?
Yeah.
Would you ever do that? Would you be glutton for that kind of punishment, Tim?
Well, and it's like I mean, you summed it up perfectly. It's like Syracuse basketball and football. It just, whatever bad could happen happens. And I've never understood that. I don't know what it is about playing, especially when you're playing in that stupid dome. Just like you said, balls bounce a certain way or whatever. It's just bad luck. So yeah, I've never liked that place. I've never really liked Syracuse. It's another rivalry that's kind of lost a little bit of the steam over the years, because Syracuse used to be a lot better than they are now in both sports. But still, yeah, I don't like that dome.
Jim Boeheim just like he's gone to like chronic complaining. Like he's just kind of like another like Pitt fouls too much. Like I know we covered that in like my podcast about Pitt basketball that one season. Like they're all just like trying to work the refs every game. Like I know, yeah, it's really good defense, but Pitt really is fouling. So it was always fun to watch Jim Boeheim whine and cry. And I mean, how many more years can Jim Boeheim even coach before he's going to retire? I mean, my goodness. How long has he been there? Since the 80s, right?
No, he's been there since before I was born.
Since the 70s.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, really?
He's literally
because he was there. I'm thinking the Keith Smart game, and that was like what, 1983? I mean, oh my gosh.
My wife grew up in kind of near Syracuse, New York, and my father-in-law still talks about Boeheim. Boeheim they'd always lose because Boeheim would make these decisions. Like he was never a Boeheim fan. And this is back when, he was a kid. He was, 5 years old or whatever. And he's still there. It's just amazing the years and years and decades that he's been there. So, yeah, I mean, to give you some perspective, I think he was there about 4 or 5 years before Krzyzewski was at Duke. So, just to give you an idea how long Boeheim's been around.
I think he's if he coaches like still for a couple more years, he'll be there after Krzyzewski has been
Yes,
at Duke.
and he probably will
And
be.
like he's literally Carmelo Anthony is probably going to retire before he stops coaching, and Carmelo Anthony's been in the NBA for as long as I mean, for a long time. So,
And that was his only
yeah,
championship, I believe, right? Was that Carmelo?
yeah,
Was it?
that's it. Yeah, that's it. Because I'm thinking of like he lost to Indiana. That was
Right.
that Keith
The
Smart
Keith Smart
shot.
play. Yep. Yeah, and they
Yeah,
lost. They
so
lost in the '90s against, I think, Kentucky. Whenever Pitino coached Kentucky. So yeah, they've been in the championship game a few times, but only that one championship. And then in football, I think the closest they came in football was when they had Donovan McNabb in the '90s. Again, those
they
were
didn't
those
win.
were
They I
no.
thought they won with him. I thought he won in that. He did not win. I thought he did.
Well, I
They
mean,
were unreal. And
take
they
it
even
with a
had a
grain of salt.
quarterback before McNabb. They had a
They
really
did
good. Was it
in the
Marvin
'80s.
Graves? Was it
I
Marvin
can't.
Graves?
Yeah, I
I
can't remember
I think
his name.
he was really good too. Yeah.
I mean, take it with a grain of salt because remember, college football doesn't actually have a championship. It's just a bunch of people vote. So, I mean, maybe they were number one in one of those polls or whatever, because that's the way college football's set up. They don't actually crown a champion. But, in terms of, what's recognized as a consensus champion, no, Syracuse has never had that. At least not, in our lifetime, maybe way back in the day, like the Jim Brown era.
Well, that was another. Yeah, I mean, travesty is Jim Brown not winning the Heisman. They voted the Golden Boy, Paul. Nothing against Paul Horning, but he's the only guy to win a to win the Heisman from a non-winning team. So the heck with that's why I just don't pay any attention to the Heisman. But I guess that's
Okay.
another soapbox moment.
Okay, 1959. They have one claimed national title from 1959. That probably was the Jim Brown, Ernie Davis era. So
Schwartzen, what was that? Schwartzentruber or Schwarzenhalter or whatever that coach's name. That guy, yeah. Actually, the West Virginia Syracuse game is they play for I think the Schwarzenhalter Trophy because I think he coached at West Virginia at one point. Also, fun fact there. Some memorable games, and of course Tim loves this one. Troy Nunes running around and throwing a touchdown. Troy Nunes, a Butler legend. Once again, Paul Pasqualoni, like he's like a Randy Edsel, but better. He would come into like Western Pennsylvania and get like these steals, Jerry McNamara, who could forget him? He had so many big shots against Pitt. I remember in 2018, Pitt won in overtime after a long rain delay. There was an interception in the end zone to clinch that. And then there was a long run. Like Pitt got down 14-0, and I remember that the season was on the verge of I thought they were going to have like a 3-win season, like an old Johnny Major season. And Allison rips on this big run, and it totally turned that game and their season around. And that was actually Pitt ended up playing Clemson in the ACC championship game that year. But that's one of my more favorite Pitt seasons and Pitt teams, that 2018 Pitt team. They weren't the greatest Pitt team as far as talent-wise, but, boy, they really overachieved in my mind. Another great thing was Jamie Dixon. Oh, he owned Syracuse. Like, you talk about, like, the bad luck, but Dixon, like, he could, for some reason, he beat Syracuse a lot. And remember when Pitt couldn't win in the Carrier Dome for like 20 years? They went like from like Dan Marino in the 80s all the way to like I think it was Rod Rutherford and Larry Fitzgerald in the early 2000s. They did not win a game in the Carrier Dome, and it isn't like they didn't play Syracuse every other year. They played Syracuse every other year at the Carrier Dome, so they literally lost a lot of games at the Carrier Dome. Tim will be happy to see that place go, I'm sure. And moving, I don't know, like it's kind of on the list. I mean, I guess it's a rivalry. It's a named game. The University of Cincinnati. In football, Pitt actually leads this series 8-4. I didn't even bother looking up what the basketball records are because I don't think it really. I mean, they played them in basketball, but I don't think it really was that big of a game. The nickname was the River City Rivalry, which is, remember the trophy? Do you remember the trophy from
I
the River
do.
City Rivalry? It
Yeah,
was like
that was
huge. I don't know
that
where it is. Uh,
probably in a river somewhere. That was. I mean, that was a. That materialized when the Big East lost Miami and Boston College and Virginia Tech, and they had to like create rivalries because all those schools had left, and those were schools that Pitt had played traditionally for a lot of years in the Big East. And so it's like, oh, it's the River City rivalry with Cincinnati because we both have rivers, and the Steelers play the Bengals,
well, it is this.
And the
It is
Pirates
the
and the Reds
same
have played
river.
each
It's
other.
the Ohio. The Ohio River is the same.
Yeah,
It's the same river, Tim.
yeah.
You
It's
know what?
just
That's my idea. What?
it was forced. It was like a forced rivalry.
I guess, yeah, you're not wrong in that, but like my idea with the River City rivalry was when Pitt won it at Heinz Field one time was to literally take it down, and you know how the river is right there, like literally throw it in the river and send it back to Cincinnati.
See
Like
if it
put little
makes it.
floaties on it and throw it in there. Yeah, it's heading back to Cincinnati. But, um, since Pitt had 3 chances against them to win Big East championships, they never really could do it. They literally had 3 different opportunities to do that. The most infamous of those, of course, being the 2009 game. Pitt lost that game on a botched extra point, and because they didn't have any defense. So Pitt and Cincinnati, like you said, they tried to coordinate this with the Bengals, Steelers. It wasn't a bad idea. Like, I think their goal was they were going to try and like schedule it the same weekend that like the Steelers and Bengals played. And since it's every other year, so I guess when Pitt would play in Cincinnati, they would make sure the Steelers were playing in Cincinnati too. It wasn't a horrible idea; it just never really seemed to work out. So,
And that's not a bad idea, but again, that's like a made up. Like rivalries are, that you can't just create one. You can't just make one up out of thin air. You can't market one. So you're created in a marketing department meeting. Like that's not how rivalries work. So you're right. They definitely had some memorable games, and that '09 game, of course, is a stain on our fandom as Pitt fans. But after that, it was like over before it even started.
yeah, and what about Cincinnati though? Like, absolutely crushing it with their coaching hires. They went from Mark D'Antonio, Brian Kelly, Tommy Tullerville, and now Luke Fickell. That, like, Pitt can't even hire one of those guys. Cincinnati's hired like 4 very successful coaches. So kudos to them, and whatever they're doing over there and their athletic department seems to be working for them. So good for them.
And they're going to be in a major conference again if you still consider the Big 12 a major conference.
I'm not sure what to make of the Big 12, but like we'll get into that later. Like I said, I'm definitely gonna have a soapbox moment here later in this. But moving on to our friends across the strait, and this is definitely a rivalry. I know we don't play them a lot anymore, and this is one that should definitely come back. Villanova, freaking Villanova. This is definitely a 5, but if we played them every year, I think it would be a little higher. It's just because we don't play them every year. It is definitely a basketball rivalry. I think we played them once in football. I mean, I don't know who's even played for Villanova football-wise. I couldn't even name a person, but Pitt actually leads 33-32. I cannot believe that Villanova does not have a bigger edge. There's no nickname for this game, so we'll call it the game of brotherly shove for our friends in Philadelphia there. Memorable moments. Okay, well, I guess Scotty Reynolds game, that son of a gun got us on a hook and lateral that Pitt fell for. The James Conner comeback game, I guess that was the one time. That was a memorable moment. The infamous game, we covered this, where Villanova had no one eligible to play because of a phone scandal, and Pitt barely won. And that was in like Villanova's old building. Villanova definitely has the edge in basketball, and it's just too bad. Like I said, they don't play anymore. Jay Wright's a good coach, even though he is annoying, but he's annoying because he beats us so much. And they're just a very good basketball program and have been since forever. I mean, Raleigh Massimino, the perfect upset of Georgetown, and yeah, I just that's the 5 schools in Philadelphia that are basketball schools. That's the big college basketball is pretty big in Philadelphia. So any Villanova hate there, Tim, or don't really
No,
care?
no, they were always one of those. Um, like you said, going back to the beginning of the Big East in basketball, they were always kind of an underdog school, and I remember really rooting for them when they beat Georgetown in that tournament because they were such huge underdogs, and no one liked Georgetown at the time, or at least I didn't. A lot of other Pitt fans didn't either. So yeah, and the Scotty Reynolds game is probably the most memorable. I did look it up when you were talking about it. They've played twice in football, 98 and 16, and neither game was all that memorable. So that's the one you're thinking of.
Yeah, well, James Conner comeback game is the only. I thought that was against Villanova, yeah. And he scored a touchdown early, and that was like a big moment because that was a big comeback from cancer treatment. So I guess Villanova has that going for it, or Pitt does. But Pitt's never really, I don't know, Pitt would always seem to go into Philadelphia and not do well, wherever they played Villanova. They would either barely beat them or lose. And, because just, I think just, for whatever reason, Villanova is just always very good in basketball. And they're not that, like you said, they're not that big of a school. They really aren't. But they seem to do, because it's them, Temple, St. Joe's, right?
Mm-hmm.
And,
yeah, but they're
Penn,
in the A10.
Penn, that's the, yeah. So sticking with teams from Philadelphia that are kind of rival, this is probably not as big a rivalry as Villanova, but Temple. Pitt leads 27-7 in football. This is probably like a 3. There's no nickname to this game, so hey, at least they're not the Flyers, I guess. They always seem to give Pitt a hard game. It's not like Temple's ever really been that successful. I mean, Bill Cosby played for them. I remember my dad would always make that joke every time we played Temple. Oh, Bill Cosby played for them. It's like, okay, I don't know. Hide your wives and daughters. I don't know. The another part that probably made this more of a rivalry than it should be was Joe Paterno saying it's important to schedule an in-state rival and then playing Temple. It's I played. I guess that was his little stick at the Pitt moment. Pitt actually losing to Temple 7 times is a joke. There was a guy named Adam DeMichel, I think it's DeMichael, yeah. He played for Stowe Rocks, I remember that, and he went to Penn State, and he was okay, but he decided to transfer, and I remember he wanted to transfer to Pitt, but it was Tom Bradley or one of the Penn State coaches I might have been Paterno, wouldn't let him transfer to Pitt, so they made him transfer to Temple. So, and then Penn State played Temple later on when he played there and totally crushed them. So I don't know. The joke was on DeMichael, I guess. But Temple was just those Temple games, there was just always something whenever you played Temple. I don't know why. And they have no fans. You talk about a team that they literally have no fan base, and Temple got kicked out of the Big East. What do you have to do to get kicked out of the Big East? That's I don't even know. That's getting I don't know, kicked out of hockey for bad sportsmanship. It's impossible. I don't even know how you'd pull that off.
Well, and that was around the time that we kind of mentioned around that time that the Big East was losing all those schools, and they were content to bring in UConn and Cincinnati and Southern Florida and all those schools rather than accept Temple or keep Temple in the fold. They just, and you're right, the Temple game every year for Pitt was just oh God, please don't lose. I mean, that was all it was.
Yeah, so it's just odd. And I do not have Georgetown on this list, if I remember correctly, but I had Georgetown. I don't know, it was always kind of a rivalry, but that was definitely a basketball one. Sticking with rivalries that are still happening, at least we play them every year. Virginia Tech. I put this at a 7, just Joe Paterno level. Virginia Tech actually leads the all-time series 11-9, which I guess because we've only been playing them since the 90s and we lost all those games in the 90s to Virginia Tech. So, but ever since then, Pitt always seems to have their number, especially at Heinz Field. Virginia Tech just cannot win in Heinz Field. The most infamous probably being was when Virginia Tech was ranked. I don't know if they were like, they weren't top 10, but they are definitely top 25. And Pitt had lost. There was Paul Chryst first year. Pitt had lost like convincingly to Youngstown State. And then like they beat Virginia Tech convincingly. It was like, what in the heck is going on here? Allison ran over like that Caleb Farley who just got drafted like in the NFL draft this, and it's like that's my like somebody's like, oh, let's show a Caleb Farley highlight. It's like, okay, let's show the one where Quadri Allison just like mauls him on his way on like a 90-yard touchdown run. And then Connor kind of did the same thing to a safety from Virginia Tech. So I don't know, Pitt running backs and them. And then like Virginia Tech's defense could never figure out that like Pitt has had like the Tyler Boards, Larry Fitzgeralds, even like Lateef Grimm. Like I don't know why like that was Bud Foster. It's like, oh, we're gonna single cover your wide receivers. Okay, if you really think you need to, that's really gonna favor Pitt there. So that was always fun. Larry Fitzgerald, had just great games because like once again they would just single cover him. And Lusaka Polite scoring a late TD to win. I think that's Virginia Tech was ranked. I'm pretty sure Marcus Vick was the quarterback in that game. And like I said, Virginia Tech's only won once in Heinz Field in all the years that Pitt's been playing them at Heinz Field. So go figure.
Yeah, that rivalry was absolutely at its peak in the early 2000s, when Michael Vick and his brother were there, and Pitt never really got the best of Michael Vick. They almost did his final season of Virginia Tech. It was the 2000 game in Blacksburg. That was the game where
he got hurt.
He got hurt, and then was it RJ English? Who was the receiver that was like wide open? And
they overthrew him.
They overthrew him.
Yeah.
So
that was RJ English.
Yeah. So I mean, but then Pitt beat them the next 3 years, 01, 02, and 03. The 02 game, I think, is the one you're thinking of where they were ranked. I want to say number 2 or number 3 in the country, and Pitt beat them at Blacksburg. And then the 03 game was that was when they had announced that Virginia Tech, that was going to be the last game because Virginia Tech was going to the ACC, and that's the one where Pitt scored in the final minute to take the lead, and then they intercepted Marcus Vick. And I was at that game, and everybody just started chanting ACC because
Yeah, I was at that game too. I just remember that. Like I remember having no fear. Like when Lusaka Polite scored that late touchdown, I remember I had no like. Sometimes you're like, oh no, like. When Tony Pike played for Cincinnati, I kind of had a feeling Cincinnati was going to score a touchdown. But, like, I had no fear that Marcus Vick was ever going to drive Virginia Tech down the field to score any type of points. I was like, there is no way. He was not going to do that. It just wasn't going to happen. It's no offense to Marcus Vick. You just weren't doing it. He just wasn't that good, I guess. So.
No, he was not his brother for sure. And I was not a big fan of his brother either. I really hated his brother for a lot of years. And then, of course, his brother ended up playing for the Steelers. And I remember I thought hell must have frozen over because I remember going to a Monday Night Football game and, your starting quarterback, Michael Vick, and I'm standing there cheering. I'm like, I can't believe that this is where my life is right now. I'm sitting here cheering for Michael Vick. But,
Did your dog look at you funny after that?
Well, and I always, and that was the other thing, like people were really, Michael Vick did some very horrible things, but by all accounts, he, we talked about this in our most reviled Pittsburghers episode, by all accounts, he was, repentant and, turned his life around. And I always thought he should have, been owed some level of forgiveness there. And, but it was odd to root for Michael Vick because back in those Virginia Tech days, boy, did I just hated that team and all their players and Beamer ball and everything. And I know they still play each other now, but it's definitely not the intensity that it was back then.
Good times. Yeah, we're gonna play special teams. We're gonna win on special teams. Wee. That would definitely be some beamer ball there. The next up is a rivalry that will definitely pit me and Tim against each other. Ooh, what could it be? That would be your University of Duquesne Dukes, who at least this year Dukes in football have something over Pitt. They beat a MAC team and Pitt can't, so they got that going for them. uh, Pitt leads all time 55-32 in basketball. Pitt leads 4-2 in football, believe it or not. And the last meeting was 1939. Do you remember that game, Tim? Oh, man. It was
Oh
just like
yeah,
yesterday.
it's crazy.
1939. I mean, wow. I was like, that Hoover, he really sucked. This FDR guy has been around for 6 years, going to turn things around. Let's go see the Duquesne Pitt game. The level of rivalry is definitely on the Brian Kelly level, although it's kind of cooled off. But like, this is like, for a Pitt fan, this is like the reverse of another rivalry. I will say this. So it was a big game in the 70s, which was definitely before me and Tim. And of course, I'm a Pitt fan, and Tim's a Pitt fan too, but he went to Duquesne, so he's got to root for Duquesne here, right?
Oh yeah, yeah, for sure. Every time the city game rolled around, I was no longer a Pitt fan at that point.
Wow, you announced your Pitt fandom for 24 hours. There you go. Okay, well, I respect that. It's the city game, like you said, the nickname. Hey, we're getting in games with nicknames. Fun times. Like I said, it's on hiatus now because Pitt thinks they're. I don't know what Pitt thinks they are. I guess they think they're someone else, and they don't want to pay Jeff Capel. That's the coach of Pitt basketball. I couldn't think of. They won't play Duquesne. I don't know why. It's dumb, but maybe it's because they're afraid because they lost. Pitt actually lost to Duquesne in 2016, and Pitt had won like 15 years in a row before that. So I still can't believe Pitt lost to Duquesne in football ever. But again, maybe Duquesne was good in football back in the 1930s, but Pitt was too. So I don't know. I can't explain it, Tim. I don't know what was going on. But in basketball, even though like Duquesne was always better in basketball than Pitt, I think historically they've had as much success, Although Duquesne's a much smaller school than Pitt. I don't.
Yeah, Duquesne basketball has definitely gone through its ups and downs over the years, and has definitely kind of they've made a little bit more of an investment in the basketball program in the last few years. But I mean, for a long time, I mean, Pitt it's a rivalry, but it's one that it's a friendly rivalry, and it's like kind of playing your little brother. I mean, Duquesne's won, I think, 3 times in the last 30 years or something. One of those was when I was there. It was in the 90s when I was going to school there, and I remember that being a big deal. And I mean, that was the one game. I've not gotten to a lot of college basketball games, but that was one game I would go to every year, was the city game. They always would play it at the Civic Arena, and that was actually the last time I was ever at the Civic Arena was the 2009 city game that went into overtime, and Pitt won. But I mean, it was a double overtime game, and that was when Pitt was really, really good. So it was always not always a competitive game, but it was always, it always mattered, I think, to both schools. And it is a shame they don't play anymore. I mean, Pitt dealt with all this garbage that I'm sure you're going to get into later from another school inside the state in football, and it's like they've kind of taken that same approach to Duquesne in basketball. It's disappointing.
Yeah, they need to play this game. This game needs to be played every year. It's just dumb not to play it. But what are you gonna do? Moving back to the rivalries are definitely heating up here. Notre Dame. So obviously Notre Dame leads the series in football 49-21-1. I didn't look up the basketball record. I mean, it's kind of a rivalry in basketball. It's Notre Dame, whatever. There's no nickname to this game, so maybe we'll call it the Fail Mary. I don't know. So level rivalry is definitely a Joe Paterno solid 7. And here's some of like my really annoying observations. Half the Pitt fans are Notre Dame fans, which is really annoying to me. So I don't know what to say about that, except for I wish it would stop. Because I've talked to so many Pitt fans. It's like, I hope Pitt goes 11-1 every year. You know, it's like, oh, you're like, I just think Notre Dame's just totally insufferable. I can never stand them. I don't like them. Any day you beat Notre Dame, that's why I like USC so much, just because they seem to beat Notre Dame on a regular basis. It especially got bad when Charlie Weiss was on Notre Dame's coaching staff, because like he just had that quote was like, "Oh, the days of losing to Pitt and Purdue are over." Well, guess what, Charlie? You didn't beat Pitt not one time the next 3 times you played them. So I guess they weren't over. They are right back, and you got fired because of it. But some memorable games: Tony Dorsett in 1975 with 303 yards rushing. That was a 34-20 win. There's a 2012 Notre Dame comeback game. That was, I think we talked about almost wins. There was a 4 overtime fumble that Pitt didn't recover. In 2008, Pitt won a 4 overtime 36-33. It was after a sprinkler delay. Do you remember that? They had a sprinkler delay.
No.
Because the game took so long, the sprinklers went off. I remember that.
Was that
and
here
they had
or
to play
there?
on the other end, because that was in Heinz Field doesn't have sprinklers. What are you talking about?
Oh yeah, I guess they wouldn't.
No,
right.
definitely, yeah. Sprinklers in Heinz Field. Yeah, good one. Yeah, we just let the grass go to hell. Yeah, but no, that was in Notre Dame. But also of course, the infamous Tyler Palco. I love this team game. And so many other great moments. It's always a good day when Pitt beats Notre Dame. So I remember there was a game where Pitt wasn't even that good, but like Notre Dame had a good team, and like somebody tried to they're like, okay, I forget who the running back was. It was like Ray Graham, Tino Sinceri, and there was like 4 other players. We're all seen in a bar carrying on last night. Ooh. It was like just you could tell like some really superstitious Notre Dame fan who was like calling the place like, I saw all these Pitt players down there and they were being really bad. You need to investigate so they can't play on Saturday or something. It was the most ridiculous thing ever. So I know I don't know why Notre Dame is probably one of the more popular teams in college football. I would still say they're probably the largest draw in college football. It's just how it is, and you just got to learn to live with it. But Pitt's definitely a traditional rival of them, and it always makes for fun games. So
Yeah, I'm glad.
Hopefully, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
I'm just gonna say, I'm glad they play each other. I think there's been, like you said, some really, really good games over the years. And Notre Dame's another school, kind of like we talked about with Duke, where people just hate them or love them. And I've never really hated Notre Dame. But I get why people do. And to your point, it is a big deal when you beat them, whether they're good or bad, because it's beating Notre Dame. So did you talk about the last game at Pitt Stadium, because that was another kind of memorable?
No. Oh yeah, here we go. Yeah, last game at Pitt Stadium. Pitt hasn't beaten Notre Dame in the last 3 games. But I was at the 2013 game the last time Pitt beat Notre Dame, and of course that was a big game. We were both at the last game at Pitt Stadium, so that was a fun one. And it's Notre Dame, so anytime, like I said, it's a rivalry. It's definitely not Pitt's biggest rivalry, but I would say it's top 3 for sure. But moving on to teams that are probably a little bigger rivals than Notre Dame, which is hard to believe. But this team is definitely a rival, and there's no arguing about this. And that would be the fine West Virginia University from Morgantown. They're a fine academic institution down there. Pitt leads this series all time, 61-40, and there's 3 ties. Actually, I remember one of the ties. Do you remember that? It was in the late 80s. I remember that game. Like, they came back and they kicked just the tie, because that was when you could tie. And I remember at the end, like looking at my parents, like, so they tied, and like, yep, that's the end. They tied. But like Pitt had like this big furious comeback to tie. It's like,
I think that was back. when West Virginia had Major Harris, and they were a pretty good program, and Pitt was kind of mediocre. So I remember that being an upset, if you can call a tie an upset. And I think the final score was something like 10-10. It wasn't a very high scoring game, but it was a big deal that they had come all the way back to tie.
It
So
was a
that was
long field goal. It was like a 45-yard field goal too. It wasn't like a gimme. And this is the level of this rivalry. The nickname, of course, is the Backyard Brawl. I mean, who doesn't know that? The level of rivalry is definitely a 10. Rich Rod or Todd Graham. I would say, just from my perspective, WVU fans hate Pitt the most. Out of WVU fans can be rowdy, but there's just something with the sight of Pitt that brings out their inner, I don't know what, but very bad feelings. And this is a heated rivalry. And it's probably similar to the way Pitt fans feel about another in-state rival that we'll mention a little later. This is definitely deep-seated, especially like I feel like there's a lot of like I would say country person, city person stuff kind of going on. Like I always kind of felt like Pitt like looks down their nose like, ooh, we're from Oakland, a fine academic institution. And then like, oh, look at these rubes from West Virginia who think they can have a university. It's my best, like, I don't know. Who's the chancellor of Pitt now? Gallagher, my best Patrick Gallagher impersonation. Ooh, yeah, if he had a monocle, like, do we have to play these Mountaineers? I don't know. But anyway, it's always fun. The West Virginia fans are definitely passionate for their football team, and that's what makes this fun. And they just hate Pitt so much; it just makes it even more enjoyable. There's always lots of fights in this game. I've witnessed them. I've seen Pitt fans try to fight 30 West Virginia fans, and I've seen West Virginia fans that are like 60 years old go after like young punk Pitt fans that are like 20. Like, in what like other context would a 60-year-old person go after like a 19-year-old kid? Like, I can't imagine any other societal thing where that would happen. Couches are always burned if there's a West Virginia win, so that's always the joke. Whenever Pitt beats West Virginia, the couches were saved that day. Reuben Brown, I remember, and Tony Dorsett during their games both punched West Virginia players. So it gets even heated on the field a lot of time. And there's lots of familiarity because West Virginia definitely comes into Western Pennsylvania recruits, especially the city. I live in the city, and it always seems like West Virginia gets really good players. Like you said, Major Harris, Rasheed Marshall. There's been so many good city league players that have gone to West Virginia and had great success. So they always seem to do well. And that probably adds to a 2-year home again and, want to kind of show Pitt what they're missing. Great name for the game. Memorable moments. Unfortunately for that 94 game where Pitt lost on the last second win. I remember the 2000 game in Three River Stadium. Kevin Barlow ran for like 200 yards. Ooh. Pitt missing out on a bowl after beating Notre Dame in the last game of Pitt Stadium was like, hey, if we win, we get to go to a bowl game. Hey, let's lose by 30. Yeah. We went over this too. I think the what ifs, the David Priestley brain fart game. Pitt did win that despite David Priestley. Antonio Bryant had a really good game. I remember the 2002 game because it was snowing. And Larry Fitzgerald on third down dropped a pass in the end zone that would have won the game. The next play, there was a fourth down play, and West Virginia knocked it down. Actually, Rasheed Marshall, I think, was the quarterback of that team. That was Rich Rodriguez, one of his first years at West Virginia. But that's probably like the last thing I can remember. Last pass Larry Fitzgerald ever dropping was that. And I think that was his freshman year. I'm pretty sure that was his freshman year. And of course, the pièce de resistance, the ultimate game in this rivalry, is definitely 13-9. It keeps West Virginia out of a national championship game. It makes Rich Rod leave. West Virginia's been in the wilderness ever since. They've never even got a sniff. They might not even have a conference anywhere to reside. It's been a shame. Like, I think Pitt and West Virginia are going to renew this on a limited time basis, but this is another one of those rivalries. Like, I'll say this, college football is just destroying itself. It's pathetic that these teams don't play each other. just whatever.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I mean, it makes no sense. It was a great rivalry, played for 100+ years, and um, I don't know what you can even say about that. It's a joke. But yeah, there's a lot of memorable moments, and there's two fan bases, Steve, that I loathe the most, and it's the WVU fan base and the Philadelphia Flyer fan base, and the WVU, that 2002 game you're talking about where it was snowing, that was at Heinz Field. I remember walking into that game and being verbally assaulted by West Virginia fans that were standing on a balcony while we were all standing in line to do the tickets, screaming like obscenities at us. And I'm like, this is our stadium. Like, that's a lot of gall to drive up here, get drunk, and then come scream and throw things at Pitt fans. But that's kind of what their MO is. You know, remember that game where they played Auburn and it was going to be on national TV and they had to, check everybody at the gate so that they wouldn't be wearing T-shirts with swears on them because it would have looked bad on national TV. I mean, uh, uh, in the 13-9 thing, I don't know that there's ever been anything more satisfying in my life as a sports fan, and that includes like my teams winning championships because it just destroyed their entire program. And it was just, to this day, it's still one of the most satisfying things ever.
Yeah, that is beautiful. I don't know I mean, they're passionate about their team. I'll say that. I'll give them that. And God bless them for it. But boy, they take it to a whole nother level. Like, I mean, I've been physically assaulted at the games, but that's just, it is what it is with West Virginia. God bless them. I don't look down my nose at them. I think they're good people. They're just really don't like Pitt. And I can understand it because it's like, you're kind of sick of like getting looked down to like people from Pittsburgh have any, you know, any kind of like gall to look down, So I guess I'm trying to stick up for the West Virginia fans a little bit here, but I love the passion and I like playing them, and it's just boring not play. It's just boring not playing this team. It's just stupid that we don't play this team every year, and this is just they're destroying the sport. The people that are the administrators are destroying college football and everything I love about it. It's just it really college football is my favorite sport. It's one that I used to follow religiously, and like I hardly follow it anymore because of how much it's been destroyed. So, but that leads us to the ultimate rivalry. And obviously, like I would say, this is the opposite. Like the way West Virginia fans feel about Pitt is the way Pitt fans feel about Penn State. And, Penn State, they do lead the series 53-43 to 4. There's a nickname, the Keystone Classic. Who gives a crap? Nobody calls it that. They just call it the Penn State game. And the level of rivalry is an 11. And that would be James Franklin, the current coach, because I really like he's the perfect epitome of a Penn State coach. Look down your nose at Pitt, act like you're anything special, which you're not, which you should be, because you're some podunk, college in the middle of the state. Oh, we got 100,000 people. What else do anybody have to do in state college? Like, there's nothing else to do in that town on a weekend. Give me a break. And they think they're Ohio State, but they're not. They're just not Ohio State, and they're not even Michigan half the time. They always brag, oh, our attendance. It's like, whatever. And then like the whole, oh, Pitt's not a rival. Pitt's not a rival. It's like, it's just the ultimate level of like disrespect is just ridiculous. Um, fun things about this rivalry. Pitt coaching legend Jock Sutherland never lost a game to Penn State. Nothing quite, like I said, works Pitt fans up into a lather like a game against them, as you can tell from me. Another fun part was Tony Dorsett, like after the 2016 game when Pitt won, was drunkenly yelling at James Franklin during his press conference. like hail to Pitt and stuff. Like, you knew that just irked, like, because Franklin, like, oh, they acted like they won the Super Bowl. It's like, give me a break. Memorable games, Pitt winning in 1979 and 1980. Pitt winning 24-7 in Three River Stadium on their way to the national championships up in 1976. Pitt lost 48-14. That's always a big Penn State brag, I guess, because that was kind of like Pitt's 13-9. They've never really been the same after that. I remember 2018. Oh gosh, I went to this game. Pitt losing 51-6 in the rain. Oh, that was horrible. That was ugly. And it rained. It rained like buckets. The 2019 game, Narduzzi kept kicking field goals instead of going for it. But more on the positive side, 2000. I remember that 12-0 game. That was the last time Joe Paterno coached against Pitt, and he lost. Ha ha, Joe, take it to your grave, 12-0. Ha ha. But Rod Rutherford scored a touchdown in that game, which was a fun time for everyone. And of course, 2016, it was a 39-42. James Conner and Peterman led the way. That's the loudest I've ever heard Heinz Field, and Pitt fans were absolutely foaming at the mouth to play them. It was pretty awesome. And that's the largest attended sporting event in Pittsburgh sports history, which I always thought that West Virginia game in 2002, I know that had gotten 68, but I guess they had added more seats by the 2016. So that's according to the internet, and the internet's never wrong. That's the biggest sporting event in Pittsburgh sports history. I'm gonna get up on my. This is wrong that this game isn't played every year. It's wrong that honestly, and nothing against the ACC, or maybe it is something against the ACC. And I just my dad started to say this towards the last couple of years when we were going to ACC games. If I never played Duke or Virginia ever again in football, would I give a crap? Really? But no, we have to play Duke, Virginia, Wake Forest, in some other crap team, and we don't play Notre Dame, West Virginia, Syracuse, and Penn State. You should just be playing those four teams every year in football, and I don't care what you have to do to get it done. That's what should be happening, and that's why who wants to go and see who wants to go see Pitt play? Who are they going to play? They're going to play I think that they're playing New Hampshire or somebody, or they lost to Western Michigan. I'd rather them lose to Notre Dame or Penn State than lose to Western Michigan. This is a joke. It's a joke, and Pitt isn't the only school this is happening to. That Nebraska, Oklahoma played just recently. In that rivalry's dead. Missouri, Kansas is gone. Oregon State still plays there in the same conference. Colorado used to play Nebraska and all those other schools in the Big 12. Arkansas used to play Texas, and Texas A&M. I guess that'll be coming back once Texas moves to the SEC. But it's pathetic. It's destroyed. They've destroyed their own sport. And like you said, they still don't really determine a national championship. They vote on the four top teams at the end of the year. What is the point of even being or winning a conference championship if it's not going to get you into some sort of playoff? And it's really not that hard to fix. You just have all the conference champions play them. And I don't want to hear any, the Sun Belt. Well, then why does the Sun Belt play in Division FCS or the top division football? Either they are a Division I team or they aren't. If they aren't, I don't have a problem with that. If you're going to say they are, then that's too bad. And if you're like Kentucky or Wake Forest, when we're in the SEC, well, then move to the Sun Belt and you can be in the national championship playoff every year then. But as they've literally killed this sport because they gotten rid of all this. And it's and because it's Pitt and these other teams that don't, I guess, have enough pull or juice, that's why it's getting swept away. And it's sad. It's sad. And it's just the only way this is fixed is if an Alabama and Auburn, or maybe if Notre Dame and USC can't play anymore. If Notre Dame and USC are one of those big draw games couldn't happen anymore, then I guarantee you would see a change. But that's just, vote for me for NCAA commissioner in 2024. But I just that drives me nuts about college football. It's just literally, the fans who are your customers are always wrong. They never do anything that benefits. And look at why, Pitt literally in 2000, 8 had a 4-win season going into the last week of the season. If they would have been in the current setup, they would have had to play like who? Wake Forest or like, some no-name, nondescript team. But no, they got to play West Virginia at the end of the year, their biggest rival at that point. Like, and that's what makes, these games interesting. And it's just, they're getting rid of it. They're just getting rid of it and not replacing it for no good reason, just so you can have the SEC and ESPN is just, you can't tell me more people wouldn't watch these rivalry games than they would, whoever, Pitt or Nebraska or whoever is going to play at the end of the season. So
I don't have anything to add to that. I mean, you're spot on. I totally agree. I don't understand, like to your point, what you just said there at the end. Wouldn't you make more money and have more people with rivalry games and playoffs and everything else? But it's just not what they do, and I've never understood it either. I miss it greatly. It is hard to get excited about Pitt versus Georgia Tech when it could be Pitt versus West Virginia or Penn State. But that's where we're at. I will comment on Penn State just a little bit. I think the hatred for Penn State, you talked about kind of West Virginia fans having that, you think you're better than us edge. And I definitely understand that. Of course, they don't help their cause when they go out and set fire to couches. But however, I get the sentiment. And I think that's the way that Pitt fans have always thought of Penn State. I mean, they just think they're so above everything. And the arrogance at Penn State was on display for years and years. And, I'll never forget Tim Curley, who is their AD, who's now or was in prison. When they whenever they announced that renewal of the rivalry, that 2016 to 2019 4-game series, they might have announced that, I don't know, like 2010 or something, somewhere around that time. And I'll never forget him being on the radio on a Pittsburgh station and just, downplaying everything about it. Oh, Tim, do you think that this might be an annual thing? It has to be exciting to be have that rivalry back on. And he couldn't have been more condescending about Pitt. I mean, it was just literally like well, we needed to fill a spot in the schedule, so I guess we played Pittsburgh or whatever this school is called. Anyway, back to I have to finish up, covering up for child abuse. So bye. I mean that. And when that whole scandal broke, it was just totally epitomized the attitude of Penn State football. We're above everything. Nothing can touch us. And if some kids are complaining about, some bad stuff happening, sweep it under the rug. Don't do anything about it. Make it go away, because we are Penn State, and that's all that matters. And if people get hurt and people get run over and lives get ruined, so be it, because we are Penn State. So I could go on another hour rant about Penn State and their arrogance and again, the lives that it ruined, but I'll just stop there. But yes, you're spot on about, the college football it doesn't make any sense at all.
I think it's just run by a bunch of people that don't know how to run a business. And ESPN like thinks they're like doing something that's going to get them ratings, when it's like, that's not. I don't think people want to see Alabama Auburn like every day. You know what I mean? Like, that's a rivalry, and it's a big rivalry, but like, imagine that not happening. It just, like, I don't think people could understand that not happening, and that's what's happened to a lot of other schools.
Imagine if they announced the Steelers and the
or
Ravens.
Ohio State, Michigan.
But imagine if they announced that the Steelers and the Ravens weren't going to play each other anymore, or the Penguins and the Flyers, or the Yankees and the Red Sox, or just, or even the high school teams in your town that are fierce rivals, and they just said, oh, no, they're not just not going to play anymore. It takes away so much of the fun of sports, and college basketball is the only entity that seems to want to take away all the fun out of what makes their sport fun. So again, no explanation, but it is what it is.
Well, when we're in charge, we'll change all that. But until then, we'll have to deal with the Pitt Duke football game, I guess. Excitement. Thanks for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed my rant. We love hearing from you. Give us a good rating on wherever you get your podcasts at. Our website is pittsburghsportsmemories.weebly.com. We're on Twitter and Facebook if you feel so inclined to like us or friend us. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Steve Wirt, and we'll talk to you next time.